Well, it's that time again. Welcome to StoryTime with the amazing storyboard. And today I intend to finish the story of Joseph from the first book of the Bible called Genesis. I hope you're enjoying the story of Joseph. It is one of my favourites. It is absolutely amazing with the twists and the turns in it. So let's set the scene and let me bring you up to speed. What have we learnt so far? Well, here's Jacob, Joseph's dad. He's living back in the land that we today call Israel. They live in tents, don't they? So we'll put him over here and we'll put his youngest son with him, Benjamin. Remember that Jacob thinks that Joseph, his favourite son, has been killed. And by now, around about 22 years have passed. That's quite a long time where we pick the story up today. Let's put Joseph back in prison. So do you remember Joseph has been thrown in prison? He's done nothing wrong. He's been there for quite a long time. And we saw last week how the king had thrown two of his servants in prison as well. The baker and the one that would taste his drinks for him. Well, Joseph was given an amazing ability by God to explain the dreams that these men had. And the one that served the king his drink got his job back and went back to serving the king. And Joseph said to him just before he left, "Would you remember me when you go to the king? Tell the king that I've done nothing wrong." He said he would, but did he? No, he didn't. He forgot. And the Bible tells us 2 years pass, 2 whole years. And then the king, the Pharaoh of Egypt, has 2 dreams. These dreams have been given to him by God. And these dreams will come to pass. No one can explain to the king what the dreams mean. And one day, the wine taster is before the king. And he remembers Joseph in prison. He tells the king about Joseph, who had helped him 2 years before. The king says, "Call for this man." And so Joseph, who was the prisoner in the prison, is brought before the king. So we'll take the wine steward away. Joseph shaves. He's probably got a long beard. He shaves. He puts different clothes on, and he comes before the king. And so here's Joseph before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says to Joseph, "I had 2 dreams, and these dreams really trouble me. I am really worried about these dreams. Nobody can explain them to me." I've said this before, not all dreams have meanings, but these ones were special dreams given to the king by God. He was showing the king what was about to happen. So he explained the dreams to Joseph. And Joseph said, "Isn't God the one that can explain dreams?" And Joseph told the king that he couldn't explain them, but there's a God in heaven who can. And so the king told Joseph his dreams. Joseph asked God what they meant, and God showed Joseph, and he told the king. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? And so Joseph said, "This is what your dreams mean. They both mean the same thing. There is going to come upon the land 7 years where there's going to be plenty of food. The fields and the harvests are going to be amazing for 7 years, 7 good years. But following the 7 good years, there's going to be 7 bad years. Years where there's no food, where there's going to be what we call a famine. And it's not just going to be in Egypt, it's also going to be in the countries around about as well." Joseph said to the king, "This is what the dreams mean." Then Joseph went on to tell the king what he should do. Wow! He said to the king, "This is what you need to do. You need to put someone who you can trust in charge of collecting food during the 7 good years in order to sell to the people during the 7 bad years so that they don't starve and they don't die." The king thought this was an amazing idea. He thought it was a great idea. He looked around all his people, and then his eyes came back and looked at Joseph. And he said, "Joseph, there is no one as wise as you. You see, he recognized something different about Joseph. We would know today that it was because Joseph trusted in God, the God of heaven, and God was with him and was helping him. And so the king said, Joseph, I'm going to make you like my prime minister. You're going to be in charge of the whole of Egypt. In fact, I'm going to make you in charge of this project of saving up 1/5 of all the grain during the good years, store it up, put it in barns, and you can be in charge of selling it to the people during the bad years. So Joseph, a bit like Moses really, becomes the second in command in Egypt. How amazing is that? And so let me show you what Joseph looks like now, because he's going to be dressed. As time passes, this is Joseph now. He's dressed like an Egyptian. He's learnt to speak the Egyptian language. He's even wearing the same makeup that the Egyptians wore. He got married to an Egyptian lady, and he had 2 sons. And I want you to remember the names of their sons later on, because later on in another story, we meet them again. Their names are Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay, now what happens next? Well, back in the land of Israel, we'll call it Israel, here's Jacob and his 10 sons, and also Benjamin, his youngest. So he's got 11, hasn't he? Now the 7 good years pass, and Joseph in Egypt does all that he said, and they save up the food. The 7 bad years began. And the people of Egypt came to Joseph, and with the people who were working for him, they opened the storehouses of Egypt and sold food to the people. Back in Israel, Jacob said to his older sons, we have no food and we are starving to death, but I have heard that there is grain, food in Egypt. Take some money and travel to Egypt, buy food, bring it back so that we do not starve and we can feed our people. So his 10 sons, the brothers of Joseph, travelled that long journey to Egypt. So off they went. And when they got to Egypt, have a guess who they were sent to buy the food from. Who was it? Joseph. Did they know it was Joseph? No. But when the brothers of Joseph came before the ruler, prime minister of Egypt, do you know what they did? Let me show you. They all bowed down to Joseph. Just think about that. Remember Joseph's dreams. Joseph recognized immediately his brothers. They didn't recognize him, but he recognized them. And then it tells us in the Bible, he remembered his dreams. The dreams about the corn bowing down. The dreams about the sun, moon and stars bowing down to him. Wow. What's Joseph going to do? Is he going to get his own back on his brothers? Is he going to get revenge on them because they were nasty to him? Is he going to be nasty to them? Well, you can read for yourself in the Bible all the things that happen over the next few days and weeks. Because Joseph, when he remembers his brothers, he starts to test them. They still don't know that he is Joseph. And he's asking them questions. He's asking them questions about their family, about their dad. Is your father still alive? Yes, they said, he is. Do you have any other brothers? Yes, we do. A younger brother. And Joseph says to them, go back and bring your younger brother. Otherwise, I think you could be spies. And he's testing them. They say to one another, we can't go back and bring our younger brother. Our dad won't let us. Why did we tell him that we've got a younger brother? Anyway, The story continues, and it's so exciting. You might like to get your own Bible out and read it from your Bible as well, so that you can enjoy this amazing story. But they do go back, okay? They go back to their father and they tell Jacob. And Jacob says to them, "Why did you tell him? You can't take Benjamin." They did bring food back because Joseph allowed them to. But it's not long before they need more food because they're running out. And so they say to their father, "We can't go back unless we take Benjamin with us." Well, they do go back. In fact, I forgot to tell you this, but Joseph kept one of the brothers in prison, Simeon, while the others went back home. And he's been there in Egypt all the time. Well, eventually they all go back. Dad lets them, and they bring with them Benjamin. So let's send Benjamin with them. When Joseph sees his younger brother Benjamin, he starts to cry. In fact, he has to turn away because he doesn't want his brothers to know that he's crying. And he starts to cry in a good way because he sees Benjamin. They still don't know that it is Joseph. In fact, when they came back, they would have all bowed down to him again. Joseph takes them to his house. He sends his servants off to prepare food for them. And then, this is what he does. He arranges them to all sit down in the order of their ages, with the oldest working down to the youngest. The brothers look around the table and they realise what has happened, and they think, they start to worry. They start to talk amongst themselves. They can still remember what they've done to Joseph, even though they don't know this is Joseph, and they're still carrying that guilt and those bad feelings inside them of what they did. Also, something else which is really interesting is that when they serve the food to the brothers, Benjamin, the youngest, gets 5 times more food than all the others. Isn't that amazing? Well, it's not long before Joseph cannot contain himself anymore. And he sends everyone out of the room except his brothers, because a lot of the Egyptians have been there as well. Up to that time, Joseph has been speaking to them in the Egyptian language through an interpreter. But this time, he speaks to them in their own language. And he says to them, "Come closer." And the brothers come closer to Joseph. And then he looks at them and says to them, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt as a slave. What you meant for evil, God has turned to good." And you know, Joseph was saying to them, "I forgive you because God has sent me on ahead, and he has used me to save the lives of all the people in this part of the world, and also even my own family as well. So what you meant for evil, God has turned to good." The brothers are scared, thinking that Joseph is still going to get his own back on them. But he's not. Joseph has forgiven his brothers. God has helped him in his heart to forgive them. Did they deserve it? No. But Joseph knows that's the right thing to do. Do you know what happens next? I'm going to finish with this. Joseph says, "Why don't you go and get my dad and all your families, because I'm going to provide for you a place to live in Egypt." And so they went back and they brought their dad. When Joseph saw his dad, Jacob, he hugged him and he cried. And the end of this part of the story in the Bible is that Jacob and all his family, they all moved up from the land that we call Egypt. And they moved. And they all would live, about 72 of them, in the land of Egypt. And the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, finishes with the people of Israel, Jacob and sons, and their families, all living in Egypt. Next week, we're going to start the next part of the story. I can't wait to tell you about what happens next.